Hi, I have Brian Zisook, founder of Audiomack here on My Point Four Cents. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Brian.
Thanks, Matt.
For those who don't know, can you just kind of explain Audiomack in a nutshell?
Yeah, Audiomack is a music streaming and artist discovery platform. It is a DSP. We are in the same category as Spotify or Apple Music. The difference, of course, is on Audiomack, you're not going to probably find every piece of recorded music in history. So we are not a full catalog offering. But unlike Spotify and Apple Music, independent developing artists can begin their journey on our platform from day one. You don't need to work with a record label or a distributor to make your music available on Audiomack. You can create an account for free and begin uploading.
I always thought it was interesting because it's sort of this weird, like, in the middle positioning, you know? Like SoundCloud is like you can just put whatever up, but there's no distributor partnerships really. And then Spotify, like you need a distributor. When you started Audiomack, what was the problem you were trying to solve?
So Audiomack launched in 2012. At the time, it was just a desktop website. And if you recall, prior to 2012, during the, we'll call it height of the blog era, artists were freely releasing music using file sharing services.
Yeah.
And file sharing services, they were never meant to be used to disseminate music. It was a terrible experience for the artist. It was a terrible experience for the fans. The links would die. There would be pop-up ads and malware. Artists would continually have to re-upload. You couldn't track who was downloading or get any statistics on performance. And so that was the problem we identified. The solution was a free alternative, right? Where you weren't going to be charged for anything. You could create an account for free. You could upload without any storage limits or time limits or number of product limits. And at the time, I was running my first business, DJBooth, and artists were coming to us pitching their music to be covered editorially. And we said, hey, you're sending us a Zippy share link. Why don't you try Audiomack? And that was sort of the genesis.
It's so funny. I had a conversation last night about that 2012 era, which felt like such a wild west of getting your music out because it felt like MySpace was kind of going away, and suddenly Bandcamp and SoundCloud and Audiomack kind of came on the scene. When that was happening, how aware were you of sort of these competing services?
Very aware, because running DJBooth, we were being sent links to preview and listen to music from a large variety of options. What we identified during the DJBooth days was artists needed an avenue to disseminate their music, but they also wanted someone to listen to it and write about it. And so prior to Audiomack, we were actually on DJBooth offering a one-stop shop. We would host your music for free so that your fans could stream it and then freely download it. And on the same page, one of our writers would provide you with coverage so that you'd be able to take lines from that quasi review and then use that when you're trying to get booked or pitched to other platforms for coverage.
That would have been very perfect in that era. That's awesome. So one of the other things I find really interesting about Audiomack is it's historically been a very hip hop, Afrobeat, Latin kind of centered platform. Was that a goal from the start, or how did that happen?
So if we go all the way back during that blog era, we were predominantly working with and covering hip hop artists who were releasing free mixtapes. So at the very beginning, Audiomack was in fact synonymous with hip hop and R&B because those were, for the most part, the artists who were using the platform. As we grew over time, the service itself took off in Africa, in the Caribbean, in parts of Latin America because of the functionality of the app itself. So by and large, if you want to stream music using one of our competitors and you want to be able to have a like complete experience, you need a credit card in order to
Yeah.
unlock the full functionality of the service. And with Audiomack, you get a premium like experience without having to enter a credit card. So we have a freemium model, Matt. You can use it ad supported, or you could upgrade to our Audiomack Plus, which is half the price point of our competitors. It doesn't unlock, tens of millions of additional songs, but it does strip away all of the ads. So when you have someone in Nigeria or Jamaica who is cash strapped, they have minimal or no disposable income, they have a hard cap data plan, they have unreliable Wi Fi. These are all impediments to being able to listen to music. And Audiomack has helped to democratize access to music for communities and in markets where that is just too difficult because of their
Yeah.
socioeconomic conditions. So I like to say, like, they chose us, right? We didn't
Yeah.
necessarily identify them and target them.
It's funny, right? Because when I first became aware of Audiomack in 2014, 2015, through our mutual friend, I was pretty young, right? I didn't process that like, oh, okay, actually this is super valuable to Caribbean, African markets. Was that a goal from the outset?
No, no,
Okay.
everyone always says, oh, you guys were so early on what's happening in Africa. Um, how did you come to the realization that that market was next? And my stock response is Africa chose us. We did not choose Africa. We have a feature using Audiomack where you can download for offline listening a limited number of songs. And this is especially helpful when you don't have any data left on your cellular plan and when you are in what we'll call a Wi Fi desert, right? And this is a significant issue for tens, hundreds of millions of
Yeah.
music fans across the largest continent. And so having that one singular feature in a freemium model made it a very easy sell.
Yeah. No, and it's really fascinating to talk to Nigerian artists who are that's just kind of the African market I have the most friends in. It's really fascinating to talk to them and to see the pedestal they put Audiomack on. My question sort of from that is, and I promised my co-hosts I wouldn't go too deep into music in Africa, but I do want to talk about this a little bit because I think it's important as a part of the Audiomack story. Talk to me about the African music scene right now. What's exciting? What should people be aware of? What are they not aware of?
I think from a Western perspective, there is a tendency to focus in on only Afro beats and specifically what's happening or has happened in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And this is not unlike the way that Westerners tend to approach a lot in life, which is to consider entire cultures as a monolith.
Yeah.
Africa is a continent, it is not a country, and it is inclusive of many countries, all with very specific and unique scenes that are go beyond just what is happening in Nigeria. And I think for us, the most impactful decision that we made was to approach each market across the continent uniquely. And so we set up an ambassador program. We opened up an office in Lagos. We hired on the ground, and we curate each market by itself because the feedback we were getting from talent in Liberia and Kenya and Tanzania and South Africa was there's more to Africa than just what's
Yeah.
happening in Nigeria. And last year, we made a very critical decision, which was to pivot our trending and Rex to a geo targeted um, approach. And so
Okay.
now, if you are on the app in Ghana or you are on the app in Mali, you are not only going to be fed artists who are seeing success from Nigeria, you're going to see artists who are making moves from your own backyard, so to speak. And this has helped create community and has helped artists and fans, connect to on a deeper level with our app.
That's so cool. And I have to imagine that that feature helps artists other places too, obviously, right? Like if I'm really into hip hop in Denver, now I get a curated playlist of Denver hip hop people who are on the come up.
Yeah. So, if I'm in Chicago, I'm going to be recommended Midwest playlists. And if I'm in
Yeah.
New York, I'm going to be recommended East Coast playlists. Back in the day, and I talk about this ad nauseum on social all the time, back in the day, there was a greater focus on regional sounds and styles and scenes. And the Telecom Act pretty much broke that up. And now, whether you're listening to the radio in New York, Chicago, or LA, you're probably going to hear the same 40 songs.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel like home necessarily. I think we need to get back to that. And the data that we have suggests that people identify and connect with music that represents their city, their backyard.
That's so true because I feel like, my own experience I see with sort of, especially like emo music, which very much had a moment in mid 2010s Philadelphia. And like I lived there and I grew up around there. But still, like there's something to be said for this record specifically has a lyric shouting out a street corner you've stood on,
Yeah,
which is,
I agree.
as like a final touch on the Africa point, what's something you feel like Westerners don't understand about that group of markets?
Probably the assumption that African music is not accessible to a non-African audience. And I'll give you an example, and that is there are African artists who make hip hop music, and there are African artists who make pop music and R&B music. Uh, Music transcends the boxes that it is put in. There's a tendency to assume a lot based on the genre classification that is assigned to a song through a label or a distributor. For example, many give some sort of vague or overarching classification like world, like what does that even mean for African music? And I think as a result, there's a tendency based on just personal preference, the way that a lot of DSPs have created their personalized algorithmic recommendations, where it turns people off from even pressing play. And so, what we've done is not just helped create more energy in Africa for African music, but we've exposed tremendous amount of African talent to the rest of the world, and in particular, the diaspora, where you have Nigerian Americans or Ghanaians in Germany or Nigerians in the UK or South Africans in the UK who want that super curated African music, and they're not getting that on Spotify or on Apple
Yeah.
Music.
Yeah. But okay, so to circle back on Audiomack as a whole, where do you feel Audiomack fits into, obviously we have a primarily Western artist audience. Where do you feel Audiomack fits into like the marketing mix? Right? Like Bandcamp and SoundCloud have kind of specific roles. What's sort of the place of an Audiomack?
It's a discovery vehicle, right? And it is a discovery vehicle that is bolstered by, I believe, best in class human curation. So at a time where all the other DSPs have deprioritized human curation in favor of personalized recommendations, we have doubled down on human curation. And so that is one point I would make. The other is our audience is unique within the landscape. And so 91% of our users are under age 34, and 94% of our users are multicultural. And so we have a very young, lean forward, discovery driven audience that is backed by library listens, is the number one stream source on our platform, not personalized recs, not trending, not passive playlist consumption. When library listens is top stream source, it suggests people hear something, they love it, they save it to come back to it. That suggests resonance and stickiness. So when an artist says, well, why should I take the time to prioritize creating community and building a following on Audiomack? I tell them we have young people who have more free time, to lean in and discover music. And that is the best potential fan you could find, someone who can grow with you because they have the ability to grow. When you find a fan who is already older, it's more difficult. They have more responsibility. They don't have as much time. They are bandwidth strapped.
Yeah, and there's also a sense, I think, of calcified relationships with the artists they already like, you know?
Yeah.
Talk to me about the human curated playlists. How does that work?
So we have really gone above and beyond to find not just curators and content strategists, but appropriate curators and content strategists who are actually on the ground in a lot of these markets. And that's an advantage that we have over other services where you have these, I'll call them qualified individuals, but who are making curatorial decisions from a New York, from a London, from a Los Angeles, where look, you could do your job remotely, but there's something to be said about being part of a scene and being able to talk to people offline to understand, is this activity that we're seeing actually translating off the internet and being discussed on the ground amongst people. And so we have team members in, I want to say, 13 states across the US. We have at least one team member in 5 continents. My department alone, which is the global content operations and artist services, I oversee 11 across 6 different time zones. So that is an advantage. Having someone in Barcelona, having someone in Lagos, having someone in London to be able to understand the markets and then take that and work with it as far as curation and content strategy.
What kind of roles do those people come from?
That's a great question. Some of them began their journey with us as UGC curators, right? So they created their own accounts, and because they love it, they started curating. And we identified those playlists for the quality of artists that they selected and the performance of those playlists. And we said, hey, would you like to do this in a larger capacity? It also helped that we created a Tastemaker program that incentivized more independent music enthusiasts to pursue curation. Some of our team members come from a radio background, some come from a multimedia, digital media, journalism background, but by and large, we employ music fans. And that is a distinction that I'm very proud of because we're all judged by the company that we keep in this business. And when people see what other services do, they tend to assume that they're being employed and that they don't care about the well-being of artists or that they're not really super passionate. And that is true in some cases, but it is not true in the case of Audiomack. Our team members love what they do.
Can you talk more about your Tastemaker program and how that works?
Yeah. So essentially, you would create an account on our service and you would have to have a history of independent curation. And then you can actually apply for a Tastemaker badge. If you are granted a Tastemaker badge, and this is where your application goes into a queue and it's reviewed by our team, it is then approved and you would be bestowed with a specialized check mark indicating that you are a tastemaker on the service. And then that means that all of your playlists will automatically be considered Audiomack editorial playlists, which means when you curate that music, notifications will go to the artist, the rights holder, or their team, just the same as it would an in-house playlist indicating that you've been added. The next phase for us as a part of this program is incorporating monetization, right? Giving tastemakers the ability to actually generate revenue for themselves with the work that they do.
When you say they have to have a history of independent curation, what does that mean exactly?
That means we need to see that you have created playlists on your profile that are regularly updated. Someone might create a playlist and not touch it for 8 months. So are you updating your playlist every week with new music? Are you updating the cover for that playlist? That shows us that not only do you care, but there's a level of dedication.
Yeah. It's funny to me sometimes when I talk to people about Audiomack or when I talk to people about streaming services, I feel like a lot of times you hear a similar array of complaints, about algorithmic playlists, about poor payouts. whatever. I always feel funny because I'm like, well, there's like kind of a solution to that.
A lot of the chief complaints that we see on social media, aside from, well, streams should be able to be monetized at a higher clip. That's a universal complaint, which is understood by all. Aside from that, a lot of the complaints we've solved for a lot of these things, right? So one of them is I want to be able to communicate with my followers, right? Every social media platform, every DSP makes it very difficult for you to actually speak to those who have opted in to follow your profile. Many will only show push notifications or posts to a small number of your following, like 5 or 10%. But if you pay them, or if you buy advertising, or if you boost it, then they'll open it up to more. So there's a financial hurdle that has to be cleared. We solve for that. We have Connect. It is a free messaging feature that is part of the Audiomack Creator app, which is a standalone app available to all creators where they can send messages, whether just to say hi or to promote a new song or video or merch drop or tour announcement. And that message goes out to everyone who has opted in to follow their profile. Everyone. If you followed the profile, you get the notification. The only way you wouldn't is if you turned off notifications for the entire app, and then you'd still be notified when you log in for your next app session. We have an in-app notification center with a little bell, and you'd see all the messages that you missed. So we solved for that. Another complaint is, well, we're doing music consumption in one place, but we're talking about it somewhere else. And
Yeah.
why not have community exist in the same place as consumption? We solve for that. You can not only comment under songs and albums, but we incorporated Connect. And so now we see communities that exist with artists in the same place that they're doing the listening. So they're not playing hopscotch from Spotify to Twitter or Apple Music to Instagram. They're on Audiomack listening to and talking about the music. And so, yeah, anyone who's listening who has never heard of Audiomack before or thinks like, well, why should I care? Give us a try, right? If nothing else, we could be a fantastic supplement to a full catalog subscription service that you might already have.
The streaming payout issue is just there because the pool of money is only so big and people want to listen to a lot of music. There's not a ton you can do about that. Now, I wanted to talk for a second about like sort of the future of Audiomack. You already talked about how the Tastemaker side of things is going to start to ideally get monetized. Obviously, you're making a lot of investments in around the African continent and internationally. What do you think is the next level? How do you think you establish more of presence and growth and get more ears on what you're doing?
Well, I'm really happy to say that we're growing everywhere right now, not
Yeah.
just in Africa,
Yeah,
which
of
is
course.
especially exciting for us. In particular, in markets like the US and Canada and UK, which are a bit more mature and saturated in terms of number of people who have streaming subscriptions. For us, it's to continue to provide a benefit to young creators wherein they can have tools and utilities at their service at the very earliest stages of their careers. You know, you you tend to see, especially outside the US, a, a ton of misunderstanding when it comes to how to approach a potential career in music. There's a lot of misinformation. There's very minimal infrastructure, right? There are no major record labels that are not like subsidiaries of a Universal or Warner or
Yeah.
Sony that are on the ground in a lot of these markets. There's just not a lot of know-how, and so part of our positioning is to provide benefit when it comes to education and be a trustful source of information to help you advance your career. So and we're playing the long game here, Matt, because if you get in early enough, the hope is that you develop a rapport both with the user and the creator, and that as they grow and they come into more disposable income and they have the ability to look elsewhere, they remain loyal because we were there for them at the very earliest stages of their career. And so we are doubling down in the markets that we are already seeing tremendous growth in. And then we're also trying to expand in additional markets. We've seen tremendous growth in Brazil, which has not historically been a focus market for us.
Yeah.
We've seen tremendous growth in the Philippines and Southeast Asia, and then really trying to hone in on the diaspora, specifically the UK, France, Germany, and parts of Canada, where there is a ton of Afrobeats, Punjabi, um, dance hall, soca consumption, and we can be the go-to streaming service for those genres.
Yeah. And so how do you feel that competes versus sort of more like full catalog streaming services?
You know, there's a place for that in the market.
Yeah.
Um, and I respect anyone who wants access to be able to listen to every piece of recorded music in history, perhaps in the same place as audiobooks and podcasts and video content. My personal feeling is when you try to be all things to all people, you sort of lose sight of your original mission, which at least for us at Audiomack is to be a artist first music streaming and discovery service. And that is significantly watered down when you're offering all these additional products that are taking time and bandwidth away from people leaning into the music itself.
This is yeah, absolutely. Because it also means the core focus of what you're doing shifts entirely to catalog, I guess, right? Like, I feel like it's like this problem of, well, if the top 1% of people are making 98% of my revenue, well, fuck the other 99% because they're gonna be here anyway, but I just need to worry about the 500 biggest artists because we have it, and that's such a
Yeah.
huge chunk of their revenue.
Yeah, I also think this goes back to who our primary user is
Yeah.
someone who is more active, less passive, who is younger, more discovery driven. If you are a fan of Taylor Swift and Chappell Roan and Sabrina Carpenter and The Weeknd, you're probably not our core user. You
Yeah.
are definitely more inclined to press play on a New Music Friday playlist and just let that bad boy rock as if it's Pandora or terrestrial radio. Whereas an Audio Mac user is younger, they're hungrier for discovery, and they have a probably more narrow scope and breadth of genres that they are interested in, which happens to align with those that we specialize in.
Absolutely. So I wanted to kind of shift in the second half to talking a little bit more about music marketing, which is obviously something you post about quite frequently. What are some of your favorite marketing tactics you've seen kind of evolving in recent months?
Everything that is new is old. That has
Yes.
always been the case. And so we've seen a return to a lot that has worked historically that for a time was abandoned for one reason or another and now is back in the fold. And so, a lot of young people probably don't know that there used to be music fan clubs and you needed to provide incentive to your primary core audience to support you in a greater capacity than just buying physical media. At least that's how it existed in yesteryear. And the return of fan clubs now can exist in many forms. It could be as part of a Patreon. It could be through a personalized app that is available on iOS and Android. So it doesn't just take one form necessarily. We've also seen a return to in-person pop-ups and activations where you are able to generate greater fandom with your core audience and then turn that in the real world experience into a FOMO-esque uh, digital moment either in real time or after the fact. So there's a duality to that approach. We're also approaching or reapproaching the time in which we remind everyone we're in the niche era. We no longer need millions of supporters. We'll take them. But if you have a dedicated core base and you figure out ways to super serve that base, they will stay loyal to you and they'll also evangelize you to others. And so, yeah, that's what we're seeing play out right now. And I encourage all artists listening or watching right now if you already have that base in place, don't wait any longer. Create a newsletter, create an email sign up list, make your own personalized website so you're less dependent on social media, which could go away at any time. Time is of the essence.
It's so funny, right? Because I feel like there's sort of this sort of Damocles hanging over a huge, huge chunk of artists where it's like one, not even dumb post, but one post that somehow triggers a filter, right? And you're not even doing something ridiculous. And you suddenly lose this Instagram presence you've been building up for, years and years. And you see it happen consistently with artists who didn't post something offensive. You know what I mean? And those artists get screwed so hard because and I've seen it happen with major label artists who aren't able to like recover their social media and they're on fucking Sony. I always joke about like every time I leveled up in the industry, I kept thinking like, "Oh, okay, now that I work with this company, I'm going to have a direct in at Facebook and it's going to be fine." And then that didn't come. And then I leveled up and it was like, "Oh, well, I'll have a and then, now I'm doing like stadium artists and it's like still the same form, still we don't know. And, and I say this as someone who like makes a large chunk of his living off of being a Instagram persona. That is
Mhm.
why you and I are friends.
Yes.
Um, you know, how do you see like what are in your eyes the best ways to incentivize people to join these fan clubs, be they SMS lists, email lists, whatever? How do you get people in?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with access. Everyone wants to skip the line. Whether you're going to Great America or the airport, there's always some sort of incentive to not have to be with the common folks. You want to make people feel special, and so that's the first thing that you need to identify is how can I make people feel special? What am I going to provide them? In my experience, people connect when tangible value is added, whether that comes in the form of something physical that they can either hold or display proudly. That is never a bad option. The other is insights and background into what you're doing. Take us on that journey. And so whether that comes in the form of a vlog or like we used to buy DVDs, right? And there'd be that second DVD which was like the director's cut, and then the director would do voiceover where he would describe during particular scenes in the film why certain cinematic or visual decisions were made. People ate that up. I would love for a Netflix or a HBO to offer an alternative version where that sort of context is provided. Artists should do the exact same thing. Fans want to feel like they're part of the journey, that they know information and insights that no one else does, so that they can brag about it to their friends. And then that in and of itself creates additional FOMO that then generates renewed and greater interest. And then ultimately, anything that helps you tell your story or expand the world around the music. And that could come in the form of artwork or visual media, short form video, merchandising. I think content has become such a dirty word, Matt, in our business. Content can be art. It's not always art, but it can be art. It is an extension of the music. And if viewed through that filter, I would hope that all artists would appreciate that it is a necessary evil and don't think of it as, separate or different, but it is part and parcel to being a modern recording artist.
So this is sort of my hot take. Everyone likes to complain that like, oh, well, in the 90s or in the 80s, you didn't need to create content like this. But if you like talk to people who were there and if you like really study what those marketing campaigns looked like, everything that's old is new, right? Like there were artists who were acclaimed not just because the music was good, but because they were really good at interviews and they were just really eloquent, right? And like the Rolling Stones made like, I don't know, like fucking 15 movies or something about just tours, and one or two of those are legendary, but a lot of them are just like, yeah, we brought a filmographer on tour, which is now just accessible to a baby artist, but that was happening. You know what I mean? And I find that really amusing that when you do actually study these things, like, it happens. And also some of these really respected artists did a lot of cringe stuff. I was watching a Rolling Stones commercial for Rice or a Rice Krispies commercial from like 1964 with Mick Jagger in it. And it's like objectively ridiculous, but like got Mick Jagger's face in front of millions of British households.
Yeah, and I would say to artists watching, if you post something or share something and it doesn't create the engagement that you were hoping for, don't be embarrassed about the performance and then delete it or archive it. Let it live, and I'll tell you why. Because as time goes on and you continue to create a digital footprint, when you do generate this fan base, if they connect with you first and then they connect with the music second, they're going to do what almost every super fan does, which is go down that rabbit hole and see what did I miss before I first came into contact with this artist. And if there's nothing there because you deleted it or archived it, that's really disappointing. I love finding an artist and then consuming everything I missed that they had previously released on the internet. And so let it live. Don't be embarrassed. Just move on to the next piece.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. Like, because you and I think, are also just music nerds, and we've
Yes,
bonded over
proudly.
that. Yeah, and but like that's to me the coolest thing is when you kind of reach through time and get like, oh, he made this demo. Whoa. And then you suddenly, like you said, it just deepens the relationship profoundly. Something I'd be curious for your take on, because it's something I get asked about a fair amount. Nigeria is one of the bigger countries for bacon spits. What is your advice for artists in emerging markets for marketing themselves? Because I think a lot of the stuff we talk about is very valid and helpful, but I feel like I want to take a minute for those people. And also, if you're an artist from the US or Western Europe, like realize a lot of these lessons can be adapted to you.
Yeah. So my recommendation is cross pollination, working with other artists who share similarities in terms of the sound or uh, audience that they're pursuing and promote one another. We see it all the time on Audiomack through the Connect feature that we discussed earlier, where you will have artist A sending a Connect message to their followers promoting the new song or album from artist B. And then in kind, artist B sending a Connect message to their following promoting a song or album from artist A. You know, typically networking is done best when it is done in parallel, meaning you have identified someone else who is roughly at the same point in their career that you are in your career. That way, it feels reciprocal. There isn't a scenario where you feel like you're doing someone else a favor and you're not going to get back what you're giving them. So, cross pollination, super important. And on social media, I think it's important to point out when people hit follow, they're not just following you because they like their music. They're following you because they want to hear from you. And so you don't have to feel concerned that if you highlight or amplify another artist on your feed, that that's somehow going to take them away from you. If anything, it makes you a more depend-worthy resource, not just for your own music, but for what's happening in the space.
Yeah, and I think there's ways to do it that don't necessarily wreck the vibe, right? Like, I think obviously like story posts of stuff you like, but I also think just taking a selfie with someone you think is cool, like who makes cool music, who is growing in parallel to you, and then just running that and being like, yo, me and this person are boys. This is sick, right? Because I see that with my own thing, right? Like before Jesse and I were like, publicly like doing a podcast or whatever together, like we'd take a selfie and people would freak out. And we're like, Jesse's obviously at a much bigger place in his career, but these things matter, is what I'm trying to say. I mentioned before, you have a very good Threads account talking about music marketing. However, it's also a little bit sassy. What are some of your favorite sort of clapback moments you've had? Because I have a few favorites because I was scrolling your threads last night preparing.
Well, you tell me, what are your favorites? I want to know.
I thought what was funny and what I wanted to kind of explore for a second was you said something like, "There's an incredible lack of good artist management." And that's paraphrasing, that might not be exactly right.
I think the word I used was dearth, which in hindsight, probably should have used a word that is more commonly known. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but I thought that was both really funny and ballsy, quite frankly. Given your position, I think that we're always in music and really in any industry, you're always like kind of trying to walk on eggshells a little bit and not upset anyone. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about the dearth of good artist management. Where is your head with that?
Yeah, so I mean, for those watching who don't understand what I do, I run global operations for a DSP, and my day to day is talking to commerce leads at labels and um, pitching folks at distributors, but also digital marketers and publicists and artist management. I'm on the phone and via text and email with these folks for 10 hours a day. I feel like I'm in a pretty good position to identify what makes someone good at their job and where there might be something lacking. With a lot of artists now, it's a matter of when do you need an artist manager? Well, you need an artist manager when there's business to be managed. And for many, they're not at that point yet. And so the individual or individuals who are fulfilling these roles, they aren't actual experienced veteran managers. They're friends, they're relatives, they're people who are learning on the job. There's nothing wrong with that, but you don't know what you don't know. And as an artist, if you are entrusting another human being to represent you, you are their proxy. The way that you comport yourself and communicate or lack thereof is a direct reflection of you as an artist. And so on a day to day basis, I see people who are supposed to be representing the best interests of artists repeatedly fail on their behalf. And like it or not, this directly impacts my relationship, our relationship, relationships in general with the artist because you've chosen this person to represent you.
Yeah. And this is sort of the crux of it. Lyle Preslar, who's the formerly of Minor Threat, now like I think the head of legal at TuneCore, he talks about like he had this quote. I was interviewing him and he was talking about don't hire a family lawyer to do your record contract because really you're just paying someone a lot of money to learn how the music business works. And this sounds like kind of a similar thing, right? Where it's like I understand you have a buddy who you think is really smart, who you trust a lot, but if they don't know what a mechanical royalty is, they don't know what a mechanical royalty is.
Which is fair. And, it's important to highlight that there are simply far more artists pursuing careers in music than there are qualified, competent, caring, experienced managers. Even then, you have, tens of thousands of managers who at various points have either left the field entirely because of the economics or who have not kept up with the changing landscape as we've gone from a physical era to a digital era to the current streaming era. And
Say it
if
ain't
you
so.
work and if you work in this business, education must be constant.
Yeah.
Um, we have a lot of former artists who have podcasts, and a lot of the opinions and takes that they provide are based on their experience, which is valid, but that experience in the 90s, as an example, or the 80s, or even the early aughts, is not comparable at all to the experience of someone who is in that position now, trying to break into the industry, fielding offers from record labels. It's apples and oranges. And I feel like a lot of publicists and managers are in the same boat. Like they're cut from that old school cloth and it just doesn't work anymore because the industry changed too much.
I think a lot of it isn't necessarily totally new. It just requires a recalibration, which is to say there are artists who like a Papa Roach is a good example of like someone who like really understood the TV media landscape in the 90s and 2000s and really understand TikTok today and are doing functionally the same things. Right? But there was definitely a like mindset shift, right? And I think that you can take those lessons. I take a lot of those lessons to heart, But I also think you have to be like, okay, you did this in 1985. Let's use modern words for what you just said.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. For every act, though, like a Papa Roach that has been able to
Yeah.
adapt to modern times, there are hundreds who have not.
Don't.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, you know, my grandmother calling me and asking me how to use an app on her cell phone. Right? There's a learning curve, and we're not really invested, and you don't have the right people around you to help you. It is daunting.
Yeah. 100%. But now I want the answer from you. What's your favorite sassy tweet you've dropped? Tweet or thread?
There's There's so many. Last year, T-Pain did an interview, and he said that when he was 18, he was offered a contract from Sony that he accepted with a $40 million upfront. I think that the conversation on social media post Kendrick and Drake beef has shifted so far into the minutia of record deals that people have lost sight of how much money $40 million is, let alone a reported 360 to 400 million for others. If someone offers you $40 million and you're a baby artist, and by the way, for anyone watching this podcast, no label is offering that kind of cash in an upfront in 2025. But at the time that he signed, this was pre-streaming era. This was at a point in time during the music industry's past where there was a grave amount of uncertainty as they were transitioning out of the Napster phase into the iTunes era. To bulk at a $40 million offer would be insanity. I don't think people realize like how much money that is. And I remember quote tweeting and saying like, look, if someone offers you $40 million, you take it, because the context here is a record label advance is not, it is not a loan. It is not,
Yeah.
it does not affect your credit. You do not need to pay it back if you do not recoup. It is considered non-returnable. So that is an advance on your future royalties. If you're taking that much money, there's a really strong likelihood that you have zero ownership. That money is significant and can be invested or reinvested back into your career or other non-musical assets that will grow over time, that will help you hedge against, an uncertain future in the arts. And anyways, people tore me apart for it, and I had a lot of fun with that. So that's why.
Yeah. One of the things I find kind of weird is like threads feels like how X Twitter used to be like 10 years ago, where like every once in a while you drop a post that you don't even think is that crazy and suddenly you get like a hate storm.
Yeah, I've accepted that is just part of
Yeah.
it now. The thing that I dislike about threads in particular, at least the current iteration, is it seems like everybody is a music industry expert and or trying to they're trying to solicit pitches for like sync opportunities, and it feels very, very juvenile and scammy. Whereas on Twitter, where I get far greater engagement, the only people who are mad at me, I'd like to believe, are those who are super fans of artists who don't understand that I'm just trying to relay neutral information and are taking umbrage on behalf of their king or queen.
Yeah. Fair play. Any final words of wisdom for us before we wrap this up?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I deeply appreciate it. I love the content you and your cohorts create
Thank you.
because it is necessary. I like to believe that you do what you all do for the same reason that I do what I do, which is to educate the masses and to provide value. There is so much misinformation on the internet, and it is very difficult to navigate this space as an indie or a major or anyone in the world. And so being a source of trustworthy information is really important. And so thank you for contributing to this positive direction that so few take. In terms of last words, not many, because I've already offered you thousands, but if you haven't already, give Audiomack a try. It's free to download. You don't need a credit card to sign up. We're available on iOS and on Android. If you're an artist, you could freely download our creator app. It's the same login information and credentials for the listener app. And if you found anything that I've said valuable whatsoever, you can follow me. I am Brian Zisook on every platform. That's Threads, Instagram, and Twitter, because I refuse to call it X.
Thank you so much.